Tonight we follow the story of Spirited Away, the quiet adventure of a girl who stumbles into a world both eerie and beautiful. The story is about to begin. The car hummed quietly as it wound through the countryside, its tires whispering over the narrow road. Afternoon light filtered through a veil of soft gray clouds, and the sky stretched wide, pale and open. Trees lined the roadside like guardians half asleep, their leaves gently stirring in the breeze, whispering in a language only the wind remembered. In the back seat, Chihiro leaned against the window, her cheek pressed to the cool glass, and the world outside drifted by in long, lazy strokes of green and brown. She watched without really seeing, her eyes unfocused, her thoughts somewhere far behind them, left back in the city with the apartment they'd emptied out that morning, the friends she hadn't really said goodbye to, the park with the tire swing she used to visit after school. She tightened her grip on the bouquet in her lap, wilted wildflowers picked during a roadside stop. The stems were bent now, the colors already beginning to fade. They smelled faintly of soil and dry sunlight. She wasn't sure why she had picked them. Maybe she just needed something to hold on to. In the front seat, her parents talked softly. Their voices were low and indistinct, like the murmur of a distant creek. Her father drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping idly on his knee. Her mother studied a map folded too many times, her eyes scanning the page without urgency. "We'll be there soon," her father said casually, "might even be ahead of schedule." Chihiro didn't answer. She shifted her gaze to the passing trees again. Everything felt unfamiliar out here, too open, too quiet. The air itself smelled different, fresher, maybe, like rain on warm pavement, like clean laundry left out to dry, like change. The road curved gently and narrowed further, and the car slowed almost without decision. Grass crept up at the edges of the pavement. Tall pines swayed ahead, forming a canopy that filtered the light into dappled patterns across the windshield. Her father eased onto a narrow gravel path, the tires crunching softly as they turned. "Shortcut," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "This should loop us around and save some time." Chihiro lifted her head from the window. The trees here grew closer together, the branches arching overhead like folded hands. The car inched forward into the quiet, and for a moment, the forest swallowed them whole. No signs, no buildings, no sound but the soft crush of gravel beneath them. And then the trees gave way. They emerged into a small clearing where the ground leveled out and a mossy stone wall stood at the far end, partly swallowed by overgrowth. At its center, nestled beneath the tangled green, was a tall arched opening, the entrance to a tunnel. The car rolled to a stop. Chihiro's father stepped out first, stretching his arms over his head. Her mother followed, brushing her skirt with a small sigh. "It's probably just an old road station," she said, "or maybe a shrine." Chihiro opened her door slowly. The air outside was cool and still. A few birds called from somewhere deep in the trees. She let her feet settle into the soft earth and stepped out, the wildflowers still clutched loosely in her hand. The tunnel was dark, but not threatening. It yawned open beneath the stone arch like a hallway waiting for its next dream. Chihiro stared at it, unsure whether she felt drawn or uneasy. It looked abandoned, yet somehow not empty, not completely. "What is this place?" she asked softly. Her father approached the archway, running his hand along the damp stone. "Let us have a look," he said. "Come on, it'll be fun." Chihiro hesitated, then took a step closer. The tunnel's mouth was cool, the stone smooth beneath her fingers as they brushed against the wall. Her parents were already stepping inside, their voices bouncing off the walls in soft echoes. She followed slowly, the sound of her own footsteps oddly distant, like she was walking underwater. The light behind them dimmed as they moved forward. The air shifted. It was cooler in here, tinged with something she couldn't name, something like old incense or forgotten books, like time stacked in layers. The walls curved gently inward, and the end of the tunnel glowed with a soft light, golden and hazy. They emerged into a field. Chihiro stepped out last, blinking in the brightness. Before them, a wide plain stretched out, dotted with quiet wooden buildings and winding stone paths. Lanterns hung from poles, swaying gently in a breeze that didn't touch her face. Her parents walked ahead, their curiosity drawing them forward without hesitation. But Chihiro paused at the tunnel's mouth, her fingers still resting lightly on the stone behind her. The village ahead looked quiet, too quiet. No people, no voices, yet food stalls stood prepared, tables lined with dishes. The scent of something sweet floated on the wind, grilled vegetables, steaming rice, roasted chestnuts. She stepped forward, slowly. The grass brushed against her ankles. The lanterns flickered faintly. Somewhere, a wind chime rang, a single note, long and clear. The world felt paused. Not asleep, not abandoned. Waiting. The field gave way to a narrow footpath, its edges framed by small stones half buried in the earth. Beyond it stood the village, low buildings with curved roofs and painted doors, their colors faded by time but not forgotten. The wind stirred again, slow and even, carrying with it that same warm scent of food, something spiced and comforting, like a memory she couldn't quite place. Her parents were already several paces ahead, stepping between the buildings, their voices casual, echoing lightly off the empty walls. "It smells amazing," her father said, peering into one of the open stalls. "Look at this, grilled dumplings, whole trays of them." Her mother lingered near a window, glancing in with mild amusement. "There's no one here," she said. "Maybe they're getting ready for a festival." Chihiro followed slowly, her eyes scanning each doorway. The village felt untouched by time, preserved in an hour that never fully arrived. Paper lanterns hung from strings that stretched from building to building, their tassels swaying gently with each passing breath of wind. A banner flapped quietly above a tea house, though the doors were closed. No footsteps echoed ahead, no doors opened, no faces looked out from windows. And yet the food was hot. Trays lined the counters, bowls still steaming, baskets of glistening fruit carefully stacked. Skewers of roasted vegetables glistened in the light. Piles of rice wrapped in leaves sat neatly arranged on woven mats. Everything smelled fresh, as though someone had just finished setting the table and stepped away for only a moment. Her father stepped up to a food stall, rubbing his hands together. "I'm starving," he said, already reaching for a dish. "Come on, this has to be for someone." "We should wait," Chihiro said softly, but her voice felt small in the warm air. "What if it belongs to someone? What if they're coming back?" Her parents didn't answer. Her mother glanced around once, then shrugged. "We'll leave money," she said, taking a seat beside her husband. "I'm sure they won't mind." Chihiro stood a few steps back, still holding the drooping bouquet. The petals had begun to fall, one by one, unnoticed. The air was warmer now. She could feel it on her skin, thick, damp, the way air feels right before a summer rain. The colors of the village had deepened somehow. Reds turned darker, shadows stretched farther. Everything was still peaceful, but the edges of things had begun to blur. She turned away from the food stalls and wandered toward the far end of the path, drawn by something quieter. A small stone bridge curved over a dry riverbed lined with pale stones, and beyond it stood a towering building unlike any other. The bathhouse. It rose from the earth like a temple wrapped in lacquered wood and painted gold. The eaves curved upward like wings. Windows blinked with red and green glass. A tall chimney exhaled slow plumes of steam that drifted into the hazy sky. The whole building felt alive, not breathing quickly, but deeply, like something sleeping lightly with one eye open. She stood at the bridge's edge. The riverbed below, though dry, shimmered faintly, as though water might return at any moment. The stones gleamed under a layer of moisture that hadn't been there a moment before. Chihiro turned back, meaning to call to her parents. But the path behind her looked longer than before. The buildings stood taller. The shadows stretched farther. And the scent of food, once warm and familiar, had grown stronger. Too strong now, thick and almost cloying, like smoke in a small room. She walked back quickly, her sandals tapping against the stone. Her parents were still at the stall, but something was different. They were hunched forward, faces buried in their plates. Their voices were gone. The air around them felt heavier, the light dimmer. She slowed her steps, her breath caught. They were changing. Their clothes had stretched, skin thickening and bulging, hands growing into something round and hoofed. Their backs curled forward. Their mouths, still chewing, were wider now, teeth flatter, eyes dull and glistening. Chihiro stopped cold. The sound of chewing filled the space between them, slow and wet and unfamiliar. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The world tilted softly under her feet. She turned. The wind rushed past her as she ran toward the bridge, toward the bathhouse, anywhere away from the village that had begun to shift and stir in its stillness. The sky above had changed. It was darker now, tinged violet and heavy with mist. She reached the bridge just as the riverbed beneath it began to fill, not with water, but with a soft silver glow that shimmered upward like fog. A figure was waiting. The boy she had seen before stood just beyond the archway, his robes pale in the dusk light, his expression calm but urgent. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to," she said, her voice trembling now. "You have to leave before sunset. The bathhouse, it's not a place for humans once the lamps are lit." She turned to look back again. The food stalls were disappearing now, vanishing into the growing mist. Shapes moved between the buildings, tall and thin, soft and silent. "I think I'm already too late," she whispered. Haku stepped forward and gently took her wrist. His hand was warm and solid. "Then listen carefully. Don't let them see you," Hold your breath when we cross the bridge, and whatever happens, don't look back." The wind was rising. The lanterns were waking, and the bathhouse ahead glowed brighter than anything else in the world. Haku's fingers closed gently but firmly around Chihiro's wrist. The contact grounded her just enough to keep her feet from slipping out beneath her, enough to keep her body from floating away like paper in wind. The village behind her had already begun to fade into the mist, the outlines of buildings melting like reflections in water. She didn't know where the sound of her parents' chewing had gone, or if it had ever truly stopped. "We have to cross now," Haku whispered. "They're starting to notice." He looked older in this light, his face still boyish, but his eyes calm and endless, like still water that hides great depths. The sleeves of his robes fluttered softly as he stepped toward the bridge. Chihiro followed. The bridge had changed since she first saw it. It rose higher now, its red lacquered railing glowing faintly as the sun slipped lower behind the trees. The river beneath had become real, liquid and luminous, with soft waves that caught the glow of the lanterns and scattered it like fireflies. Haku leaned close to her ear. "Hold your breath completely. If you breathe, they'll see you." Chihiro nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the bridge. The moment her foot touched the wooden plank, the air grew thicker. The mist coiled around her ankles like thread, and the first spirits passed them, tall, faceless figures with parasols, small creatures with glimmering eyes, floating shapes that shimmered like silk in moonlight. They passed without stopping, without speaking. But Chihiro could feel them, not just their presence, but their attention brushing against her like static in the air. Their shapes moved slowly, gracefully, with purpose. She kept her head down, clutching her bouquet tighter even as another petal slipped free and drifted over the edge of the bridge into the glowing river. Her lungs ached. Haku's hand stayed, wrapped around hers. They reached the halfway point. From the bathhouse ahead came sound now, muted laughter, distant bells, the faint thrum of pipes and pulleys and steam. A masked figure paused ahead of them, one foot resting on the edge of the bridge, tall and still. Its eyes were dark slits in a smooth white face, its limbs wrapped in layers of dark cloth that moved without touching the wind. Chihiro's breath trembled in her chest, pressed tight against her ribs. The figure tilted its head slightly, then turned and walked away. They moved again. By the time they reached the far end of the bridge, her vision was swimming and her lungs burned. The moment Haku pulled her off the final step, she gasped, quietly sucking in a breath as though surfacing from deep water. "Good," he said softly, "you made it." Behind them, the spirits continued to cross, uncaring, unseeing. Before them stood the side entrance to the bathhouse. It was carved from dark wood, polished smooth by time. Steam drifted from vents above, and a faint golden light flickered just beyond the frame. The scent of hot water and old cedar filled the air, layered with traces of flower oil and rice flour. "From this point on," Haku said, his voice low, "you're in their world. You need to act like you belong. Speak softly, move slowly, don't ask too many questions." Chihiro nodded, swallowing hard. Haku pushed the door open. The warmth washed over them instantly. Inside, the bathhouse was a world all its own, dimly lit but glowing from within, alive with sound but soft-edged, like a dream retold through paper walls. The floors were smooth and dark, worn with the passage of thousands of quiet feet. Pipes hissed gently behind walls. Shadows moved past doorways. And overhead, the ceiling stretched far beyond what should have been possible, as if the building had no top, only layers upon layers of halls and rooms and hidden stairways that reached into memory instead of sky. Chihiro stood still, letting it all wrap around her. The warmth, the scent, the low murmur of voices she couldn't yet see. Haku motioned for her to follow. He moved quickly now, slipping down narrow halls and behind stacks of folded towels, up a flight of stairs that turned sharply into a dark hallway lined with sliding doors. They passed a room filled with jars of dried leaves, another stacked high with towels embroidered with strange characters. Through the wooden slats of a window, Chihiro glimpsed the central bath, enormous and glowing, with clouds of steam billowing upward like silent music. Eventually, they stopped in front of a sliding door, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. "She's not going to like this," Haku said quietly. "Who?" Chihiro asked, her voice barely above a breath. "Kamaji," he said, "but we need him. He works the boilers. He can help you stay hidden for now." Without knocking, he opened the door. Warm air rushed out, thick and fragrant. And from deep inside, a dozen tiny sounds greeted her. Clicks, clinks, the soft shuffle of feet no bigger than her thumb. The door closed behind them, and the spirit world, still unfolding, stretched one layer deeper. The door closed behind them with a soft wooden sigh. Chihiro blinked as her eyes adjusted to the light. The space was dim, but alive with motion. It wasn't the warm, open glow of the bathhouse above. It was something deeper, older, like a pocket of breath hidden beneath a great sleeping beast. Pipes curved along the walls like coiled snakes, steaming gently as they disappeared into the shadows. Chains clinked from above, hanging from rafters like forgotten jewelry. The floors were stone here, cool, damp, marked with faint moss in the corners. And heat, the air was thick with it, the kind of heat that pressed against your skin without burning, the kind that carried the scent of damp rock and old copper and something like pine resin. Haku moved ahead, slipping past piles of firewood and stacked baskets filled with herbs. Shadows flickered along the walls as unseen machinery exhaled quietly in the deep. There was no clear ceiling, just beams upon beams disappearing into a soft, glowing haze above. Chihiro stepped carefully, her sandals making the faintest sound against the stone. The bouquet she still carried had lost all but 3 petals. She hadn't noticed when the others had fallen. In the center of the room sat a platform surrounded by low shelves and tools. Atop it was an old cushion, worn and patched, and from it stretched a figure unlike any she'd seen before. Long arms, 6 of them, wrinkled face, tiny glasses perched on a nose like the bridge of a worn mountain. His limbs moved like clock hands, never rushed, never idle. 2 stirred a pot with a long iron rod. 1 fed coal into a small furnace. Another scribbled notes in a narrow book. The last adjusted a rusted dial with the same care a musician might give to tuning a harp. "Kamaji." Haku stopped a few steps away. "She needs help," he said simply. The old spirit didn't look up. "I don't help humans," he muttered, his voice thick and gravelly, like stones rubbing together at the bottom of a well. "She won't survive otherwise." Silence. The soot shifted in the air, and then, from behind the shelves and boilers, they appeared, tiny, wide-eyed shapes no taller than teacups. The soot spirits, little balls of dust with limbs like matchsticks, each one quietly carrying a lump of coal twice its size. They moved through the space in rhythm, clink, scurry, clink, pausing only when Chihiro stepped closer. A few of them turned their glowing eyes toward her, blinking with cautious curiosity. She knelt slowly. One of them had dropped its coal. Without thinking, she picked it up, held it out, and waited. The soot spirit hesitated, then took it gently. Another came closer and tugged at the hem of her robe. Kamaji finally looked up. He rumbled, "They like you." He scratched his chin with one long finger, then turned his gaze to Haku. "Name." "Chihiro," Haku said, then corrected himself. "Sen Yubaba will give her work. She just needs to stay hidden until then." Kamaji's eyes narrowed behind his glasses. "Yubaba doesn't give, she takes." Still he stood, or unfolded, rather, his long limbs stretching slowly as he shuffled to a side wall and tugged a cord that ran into the ceiling. Above, a bell jingled once, soft and metallic. Somewhere far away it would be heard, a signal, a request. "Lin will come," Kamaji muttered. "She'll take her upstairs." Chihiro didn't speak. She watched the soot spirits return to their rhythm. She listened to the gentle puff of the furnaces. She felt the warmth seep into her sleeves and fill the spaces between her thoughts. She didn't understand the rules of this place, not yet. But she recognized the feeling of being allowed to stay. Haku leaned down beside her. "I have to go now," he said. "You'll be safe here." She nodded. She wanted to ask more, but the words wouldn't come. He slipped away as quietly as he had come. And she remained, kneeling among soot spirits and steam, in a quiet room beneath the world. The door above creaked open. A new voice called down, casual and amused. "Kamaji, what did you drag up this time?" Steps followed. Not hurried, just inevitable. Lin's voice arrived before she did. It came through the open ceiling hatch in a tone that hovered somewhere between tired amusement and half-hearted scolding. Chihiro didn't know her yet, but the voice felt lived in, sharp at the edges, but not unkind. She appeared a moment later, feet first, climbing down a ladder one rung at a time, with a bundle of towels tucked beneath one arm and a bottle of something dark clinking against her hip. She landed with a small thud, adjusting her sash. Then she saw Chihiro. Her eyes narrowed. "She's a human," Lin said flatly, turning to Kamaji. "Why is there a human in the boiler room?" Kamaji was already turning a dial, not looking up. "She needs a job." "She needs a brain," Lin muttered, folding her arms. "She won't last a day up there." "She needs to see you, Baba," Kamaji said. "She'll sort it." Chihiro stood, brushing dust from her knees. The warmth of the room clung to her like steam in fabric. She didn't say anything. Lin sighed. It was the kind of sigh that meant she had already agreed, even if she hadn't said it out loud. She tucked the towels into a basket and looked at Chihiro again. Well, come on, the boss doesn't like to be kept waiting, especially not by, well, whatever you are. Chihiro followed. They climbed the ladder, Lin leading quickly without looking back. Chihiro's fingers gripped the rungs, still slick from steam. The hatch above creaked open, and for a moment the smell of the boiler room was replaced by something sharper: soap, brass, incense, and roasted chestnuts. The upstairs corridors were warmer, wider. The bathhouse above the boiler room was louder too, though the sounds were still soft, like voices speaking through walls, tubs being drained, towels being wrung out, buckets of water being carried with both hands. Spirits passed them in the halls, some with robes trailing behind them, some barely more than floating puffs of smoke. Most paid Chihiro no attention, but one or two looked her way a moment too long, Lin noticed. "Don't talk to anyone," she said over her shoulder. "Don't look at anyone, don't answer any questions." "I wasn't going to," Chihiro whispered. Lin smirked. "Good, you might make it past the front door then." They reached a staircase. It spiraled upward through the center of the building, disappearing into a golden void above. As they climbed, the smell of the bathhouse changed again, becoming richer, denser, like lacquered wood and old paper, warm wax and strange flowers that bloomed only under moonlight. "Yubaba's in her office," Lin muttered. "She always is. She'll try to scare you. Don't run, don't cry. And whatever you do, say your name, loud and clear. If she gets it first, she keeps it." Chihiro didn't answer. Her heart was a quiet drum in her chest. They reached a tall red door with a golden handle shaped like a coiled fish. Lin knocked once, then stepped back. "Good luck," she said, already turning to leave. "You'll need it." The door creaked open on its own. The space beyond was wider than the room should have been. It bent upward and outward, like the inside of a shell. Walls lined with velvet curtains, lamps shaped like birds. A writing desk stretched across the far end, cluttered with scrolls and inkwells and broken wax seals. Behind it sat Yubaba. She looked like someone who had lived in this world longer than its stones. Massive head, sharp nose, rings on every finger, hair coiled like smoke above a fireplace. Her eyes were small behind jeweled glasses, but they saw everything. She didn't look up when Chihiro stepped forward. "I don't hire humans," she said, her voice low and musical, like a cello played underwater. Chihiro didn't speak. Yubaba's quills scratched against the paper. "Go back where you came from," she added, "before this place eats the rest of you." Chihiro's throat felt dry, but Lin's words echoed somewhere near her ribs. "Say your name." She stepped closer. "My name is Chihiro Ogino," she said. "I want to work." Yubaba looked up. Her eyes were sharp, not cruel exactly, just old and tired of being surprised. "You're persistent." "I'll do anything," Chihiro said. Her hands trembled at her sides, but she didn't back away. Yubaba sighed slowly. Her fingers tapped the edge of the scroll. She tilted her head. "Anything?" she asked. "Yes." A scroll appeared on the desk with a whisper, blank but humming with a faint golden glow. Yubaba handed her a brush, then "Sign your name." Chihiro reached out. Her fingers closed around the handle, smooth and warm. She dipped it into ink and bent to the scroll. Chihiro Ojina. The letters glowed once, then faded into the paper. Yubaba snatched the scroll back with one hand and studied it for a moment. Then she laughed. A short, satisfied sound. "Well then," she said, "from now on you're Sen." The scroll rolled itself up and disappeared. "Lin will give you your first task. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat anything unless it's handed to you. And don't ask about your parents." Chihiro blinked. "You already know," she whispered. Yubaba raised one eyebrow. "I know everything," she said, turning back to her scrolls. "That's how I've lasted." The door opened behind Chihiro. Lin waited. Sen turned and walked toward her, not sure when the name had begun to fit, not comfortably but lightly, like something borrowed. The door closed with a whisper. The name Chihiro stayed behind it. The bathhouse smelled different now. Not just because Sen had been named, but because she'd been seen. The rooms had begun to acknowledge her, not as an intruder, but as something else, something placed. Her footsteps left slightly firmer echoes. Her hands seemed to know what they were carrying. Even the shadows in the corners had softened their gaze. Lin led her through a maze of corridors, her arms filled with folded towels and small bars of soap. "You'll carry, you'll scrub, you'll run errands, that's all. If they ask more of you, do it. If they ignore you, stay quiet." Sen nodded. Outside, the sky had turned a darker blue, almost velvet. Lanterns blinked to life along the outer balconies, each one a warm eye gazing gently outward. The river reflected their glow, trembling with the weight of the steam that drifted from above. Somewhere, a bell chimed, a low melodic sound that melted into the wood of the walls. The work began without ceremony. Lin handed her a bucket filled with soft brushes, a pair of worn sandals, and a plain apron. "You're assigned to wash room 3. No one else wants it. The drain gets stuck, and the tiles are cracked, but the spirits like it quiet, and so do you, I bet." Sen took the tools without complaint. Her hands still bore the faint ink scent of Yubaba's scroll. Her name still echoed faintly behind her ribs, Sen, 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 as if trying to fill the space where Chihiro had been. The washroom was tucked behind a sliding wooden door near the end of a hall where the floor sloped slightly, and everything smelled like ginger, salt, and old rain. Inside, the bath was long and rectangular, with a row of delicate windows that opened just a sliver to the outside air. A trickle of warm water flowed into the tub from a bamboo spout, its rhythm constant. A small wooden ladle floated in a lazy spiral on the surface, nudging gently against the stone. She knelt by the edge and dipped a cloth into the water. It was warm, not hot. It seeped into her palms and slowed her breathing. Work came in movements. Scrub the tile, rinse the buckets, stack the towels, refill the soap tray. Then start again. Spirits arrived silently, some shaped like mist, others like squat moss-covered stones with blinking eyes. None of them spoke, but they nodded, sank into the water, let out long, quiet sighs. Sen did not interrupt. She moved through the room like steam, present but never in the way. She didn't know how long she worked. The time here had started to stretch and fold, like it had unspooled and forgotten where it was headed. At one point, a spirit with long silver limbs reached out a hand to her as it left the bath. In its palm sat a small piece of polished wood carved into the shape of a leaf. Sen bowed and took it without a word. Lin found her later, still stacking towels long after the bath had emptied. "You lasted longer than I thought," she said, leaning against the doorway. Sen blinked. Her hands were damp, her sleeves rolled past her elbows. She hadn't noticed the ache creeping into her shoulders. "I didn't want to leave a mess," she said. Lin didn't reply, she just nodded. "You'll sleep in the west wing with the others," she said finally. "You'll hear snoring, ignore it. It's better than dreams in this place." Sen followed her again, back through corridors now wrapped in soft shadow. The bathhouse pulsed low around them, humming like a giant beast curled up and breathing through the walls. They passed a window. Out beyond the bridge, the sky had deepened to full night. The river shimmered like black glass, and above it, a new shape floated, tall and still, waiting near the gate. The masked spirit. No face. It stood quietly in the same place Chihiro had first seen it, half in shadow, half in lamp glow. Its face turned toward the bathhouse, unmoving. Sen paused, her fingers brushing the wood of the window frame. "He's still there," she said quietly. Lin didn't look. "He always is." They kept walking. The hallway narrowed. A sliding door opened into a long, low room filled with folded blankets and wooden lockers. The walls were lined with cubbies. Lanterns hung from the beams, flickering like slow, sleepy fireflies. "This is you," Lin said, gesturing to a futon rolled near the back wall. "You want to be useful, not noticeable, got it?" Sen nodded. Lin left without saying goodnight. Sen sat for a long time on the edge of the futon. Her legs ached. Her hands were dry. Her name still echoed faintly. She watched the lanterns sway with the air and let her mind drift like steam toward the river, toward the masked figure, toward the memory of her parents in a village that might already be gone. Sleep came slowly, not as a fall, but as a long, slow slide into warmth. The bathhouse woke before the sun. Its wooden bones creaked softly in the dark. Pipes whispered to each other behind the walls. Buckets clinked. Ladles dipped into warm pools. The first wafts of steam curled into the corridors like a yawn unfurling after sleep. Sen opened her eyes to a dim room, the lantern above her still glowing with the final hush of night. Around her, the others slept, some with soft snores, some murmuring in languages she couldn't understand, words drifting up like leaves. She sat up quietly, the blanket sliding from her shoulders. Outside the paper window, the world was still mostly dark, a blue that barely moved. The river lay quiet, the bridge shimmered faintly in the pre-dawn light. She dressed and stepped into the hall, her bare feet silent on the wood. The bathhouse breathed around her. She walked without urgency, past the kitchens where the smell of toasted grain and boiling broth had just begun to gather, down the narrow stair that creaked like an old memory, past a broom leaning in the corner, perfectly still, as though waiting to remember its last task. Something made her pause. A quiet presence at the far end of the corridor. She turned toward it. There, just past the edge of the lantern light, stood no face. The same stillness, the same white mask, as if he had never left the spot near the bridge, only followed the mist until it led him here. Sen said nothing. She didn't feel afraid, not exactly. The spirit stood there like fog does, unasked for, but not unwelcome. She stepped forward. He didn't move. In her hand was a small cloth, folded neatly from the towel bin she'd been carrying. Without thinking, she held it out. For a long moment, No Face did nothing. Then slowly, he raised one translucent hand and accepted the cloth. His mask tilted just slightly. And then, without sound, he stepped backward into the shadows again. Sen remained still, holding the shape of the moment between her fingers. The hallway remained quiet. Later, the shift began. Lin handed her a tray of soaps and a long-handled scrub brush. Washroom 5 today. There's an old spirit who likes seaweed oil and won't speak to anyone unless you bow twice. Sen nodded. She passed through the same corridors she was beginning to memorize. Yet today, the bathhouse seemed to be watching her differently. Eyes that hadn't met hers before did now, briefly. A small spirit with 4 arms offered her a pastry without being asked. A door that always stuck slid open with ease. In the baths, the waters were warmer. She knelt beside the pool, gently scrubbing the stone edge, the steam rising to touch her cheeks. The spirit she was assigned to, a rounded figure with coral-like fingers and eyes that blinked from under a translucent dome, nodded to her as it slipped into the bath. It didn't speak, but it placed something beside her, a single polished shell no larger than a fingernail. Sen didn't ask why. She only bowed twice. By midday, the sky outside the bathhouse had turned to pale gray. Mist rose from the river and clung to the windows like soft fingers. Somewhere, wind chimes sounded, a soft scale that faded quickly. Sen paused in the hallway, carrying a bucket of pressed towels. A shadow passed over her from behind. She turned. No Face was following her now. He didn't step quickly, didn't reach out, just drifted a few paces behind, keeping close like a second breath. Sen didn't stop him. She placed the bucket beside a bench and waited. He stood still. She nodded once. He mirrored it. The quiet between them wasn't empty. It was full of something nameless and strange, like the way light filters through steam, familiar but impossible to hold. The rest of her shift passed in fragments. More spirits, more steam, more repetition. But through it all, No Face remained nearby, always silent, always a step away, never interfering. That night, as she washed her hands in the long basin behind the main hall, she glanced at the window. He was there on the outer balcony, barely visible through the drifting mist. Watching, waiting, but not asking. Sen dried her hands, her fingers raw and pink, and returned to her room. The others had already unrolled their futons, already drifting. The lantern above her bed swayed gently as she lay down, its light folding across the ceiling in soft waves. She didn't feel watched. She felt remembered. And in the dark, The spirit with no name stood quietly beneath the bathhouse eaves, holding the folded cloth she had given him. It started with a murmur. Not loud, not urgent, just a change in the current of sound that passed through the bathhouse halls. A few spirits gathered by the windows. Lynn stood in the doorway, arms crossed, chewing idly on a dried plum. Even the soot spirits in the boiler room paused in their work, their tiny black eyes turned upward. "Something's coming," Kamaji said, not looking up from his kettle. "Haven't felt it in a long time." No one used the word guest. They didn't need to. Outside, the light had thickened, not darker exactly, but dense, like amber. The mist that usually curled over the riverbanks had settled into the water now, wrapping around the stone bridge in a tight, slow spiral. Sen was collecting towels when Lin found her. "You're helping with this one," she said, tossing a bottle of herbal oil into a small wooden tub. "Don't complain." "I'm not," Sen replied, setting the towels down. "What kind of spirit is it?" "No one knows," Lin said, "just big and old." They waited by the main bath. Steam rose slowly from the pool, already prepared with fresh herbs and heated stones. Slices of orange peel floated on the surface, and lanterns had been lit early, casting reflections on the tile. Then came the scent. Not awful, not sharp, just earthy. Wet earth, rain that hadn't dried, roots, iron, something heavy. And then it arrived. It didn't step into the room, it rolled in, dragging itself forward with slow, deliberate weight. Layers of mud and weeds clung to it like robes. Its face was barely visible beneath the muck, just a hint of curved eyes and a mouth sunk into itself like an old knot. The workers stepped back. Sen did not. She held her bucket and brush with steady hands, though her heart had picked up its pace, thudding gently in her ears. The spirit paused at the edge of the bath. Water rippled. Sen stepped forward and bowed, not deeply, just enough to show respect without fear. "I'll help you," she said, her voice quiet. The spirit groaned, a sound low and wide, like water moving beneath stone. It entered the bath. The surface roiled, spilling gently over the edge. Murk filled the water, old leaves, broken branches, a flicker of something sharp, metal, a glint of glass. Sen knelt by the edge, dipped her cloth, reached forward. Every movement was slow, careful. The spirit did not protest. As she worked, the muck came loose in pieces, a cracked sandal, a bent spoon, the leg of a rusted chair. Still, the spirit said nothing, but its body shifted with each release, growing lighter in the water, shedding the memory of everything it had carried. Sen's fingers found something solid. She pulled. It resisted. Haku appeared beside her without warning. His hands joined hers. Together, they heaved. A bicycle frame broke free from the spirit's side, twisted and dripping. It fell to the tile with a clang that echoed up into the rafters. Then the water changed. The murk dissolved. The scent faded. The spirit rose, not on legs, but on the current, lifted by its own release. Its shape uncoiled like a ribbon in wind, revealing something long and luminous, a form that shimmered with light like rain on silk. A river spirit. Beneath the mud and junk and time, it had always been water. It bowed once, low and slow. Then it vanished, a breeze across the surface of the bath. Only stillness remained. Sen sat beside the pool, her knees wet, her hands streaked with earth. A single token lay where the spirit had been round, golden, humming faintly like a memory being remembered for the first time in years. She picked it up, held it in her palm. It was warm. Lin helped her to her feet. "You did well," she said, brushing a bit of leaf from Sen's hair. "Yubaba will notice." Sen didn't respond right away. She looked down at her hands. They smelled of moss and metal, but beneath it all, clean water. The bathhouse settled around them again, already shifting to its next task. The mist outside thinned. The lanterns swayed gently. The water in the tub stilled, its surface smooth as glass. But something had changed. Not loudly, not sharply. Just enough. The rain began after nightfall. Not loud, not sudden, just the kind of rain that makes the air quieter, the kind that paints the rooftops in slow-moving beads and drapes the bathhouse windows in soft, watery threads. The lanterns reflected in every droplet. The whole building looked like it was melting into its own glow. Sen sat at the edge of a high hallway balcony, legs folded beneath her, watching the mist roll in over the river. Her shift had ended, but she didn't want to sleep. Not yet. Not while everything outside was so hushed, like the world was listening. The golden token from the river spirit rested in her palm. She hadn't let it go since the bath. Not because she was afraid to lose it, but because its warmth hadn't faded. It pulsed faintly, not in heat, but in something else, something close to memory. A voice stirred behind her. "You're different now." It was Haku. He didn't come often, but when he did, it was always at the edges of things, between shifts, between thoughts, between the last chime of a bell and the silence that follows. Sen looked up. "You mean because of the river spirit?" Haku shook his head. "Not just that." He stepped beside her and leaned against the balcony rail, his sleeves catching drops of rain. "You're remembering how to be in this world," he said, "without forgetting who you were." Sen tilted her head. "Is that what happened to you?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. The river below shimmered. Rain fell in small circles. The trees on the far bank blurred like brushstrokes. "I think I knew you," she said, not really meaning to speak it aloud. "Before all of this." Haku turned to her slowly. His eyes were steady but far away. "Maybe you did." Sen held the token tighter. "It feels like I've been here before," she said, "or like I dreamed it once and the dream forgot to end." "Some places stay inside us," Haku replied, "even if we don't remember how they got there." A breeze drifted through the hall behind them, stirring the paper curtains. Haku closed his eyes for a moment. "I don't know my real name anymore," he said. "I've tried to remember, but it slips away when I reach for it, like holding water in your hands." Sen watched the rain fall past his face, leaving no mark. She thought of the tunnel, the moment they arrived, the stone bridge, the dry riverbed that had filled with light. Something fluttered in her chest. Was it a river? She asked quietly. Is that what you were? Haku didn't speak. Not yes, not no. Only silence. But in that silence, she felt something move between them, not in words, not even in thought. Recognition, not of what he was, but of how it felt to forget yourself, and how it felt to be gently remembered. A soft footfall echoed in the hallway behind them. Lin, passing with a tray of empty bowls, glanced their way but said nothing. Her presence came and went like smoke. Haku turned back toward the river. There's something coming, he said, almost to himself. Sen looked at him. He stood so still that for a moment she wasn't sure if he'd spoken at all. What do you mean? She asked. But his gaze had gone farther than her question. I don't know yet, he said finally. Then more gently, but I'll try to remember. He stepped back from the rail. You should sleep. I'm not tired. You will be, he said. This place never stops, it only slows. He began to walk away. Sen turned back to the river, watching the mist rise from the trees, the faint outline of no face lingering on the far balcony, still and unreadable in the shadows. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know what Haku had been. But she could feel the memory of something important floating just beneath the surface, like a name caught in the tide, waiting for her to look in the right direction. It began with little things. A cup left full on a table that no one remembered placing. A broom propped against the wrong wall. A door usually stuck, swinging open without a sound. No one spoke of it. Spirits moved on with their routines. The bathhouse did not shout when things changed. It merely adjusted its rhythm, like a song that had added a new note quietly in the background. But those who were paying attention could feel the current shifting. Zen noticed. It wasn't fear that stirred in her, just awareness. A kind of listening. She moved through the morning like always, folding towels, preparing oils, refilling soap trays, but her steps were slower, her eyes lingering longer in doorways. She passed mirrors that didn't reflect her at first, then blinked once and caught up. Lanterns flickered slightly when she stepped beneath them, just once, as if nodding. At midday, she returned to washroom 5 to prepare it for the next guest. There was already someone inside. No face stood in the corner. Not waiting, just there. His tall black shape blended with the shadows of the wooden walls. His mask, still and pale, tilted slightly toward her. Sen paused. You're not supposed to be in here, she said gently. No face said nothing. The bathwater was still. She walked forward slowly, keeping her voice calm. This room hasn't been cleaned yet. If you'd like a bath, I can prepare one downstairs. No answer, but he didn't move. Then, from beneath the folds of his robes, he held something out. A handful of gold flakes. They shimmered in his open palm like tiny suns caught in dusk. Sen shook her head. I don't need that. The hand didn't lower, it didn't insist. It just remained, offering. Sen stepped closer. You don't have to give anything. You can just stay if you want." For a moment, nothing changed. Then the hands slowly retreated, folding back into the blackness. She knelt at the edge of the bath and dipped her cloth into the water, beginning to wipe down the stone lip. No face stayed in the corner, watching, motionless. He followed her again that evening. Not close, not hidden, just present. He stood near the kitchen doors while she carried trays, waited at the bottom of the stairs as she fetched towels. When she returned to her room that night, she found a small sprig of river mint folded in a cloth napkin on her blanket. No one saw him place it. No one claimed it. But she knew. The next morning, the bathhouse felt a little warmer than usual. The steam thicker, the lights softer. And when she passed the mirror outside the main hall, she saw No Face's reflection beside hers, even though he was nowhere in the room. That day, two spirits argued in the hallway, something that never happened. A jar of oil cracked when no one touched it. The ink in Yubaba's ledger smudged before it dried. Small things, barely worth noticing. But the bathhouse noticed. And somewhere, behind the warmth and order, something had stirred awake. Sen stood on the balcony again that night, watching the stars blur behind mist. Her hands rested on the wooden rail. Her sleeves were damp from the last bath of the day. She hadn't spoken of No Face to anyone, not because she was hiding it, but because the truth was quiet. She didn't know what he wanted, only that he had come through a door she hadn't meant to leave open. And now he was inside. The bathhouse had always breathed. Its timbers sighed in the afternoon. Its stones grew warm underfoot as the sun passed through the lattice windows. Pipes whispered in the walls, and the great copper tubs echoed like deep-throated bells when empty. Even its silence was never still. But now that breath had changed. Not stopped, not broken, just shifted. Like a thread loosening in a tapestry, imperceptible at first, but spreading if followed. Sen noticed it in the laundry room. The towels, usually warm and freshly folded, arrived still damp, their corners wrinkled like forgotten thoughts. The soaps left a faint trace of smoke when unwrapped. The water smelled more like the river now, earthy, distant, as if its source had drifted farther away overnight. She said nothing. She simply worked. Each task repeated like a lullaby: scrub, rinse, fold, carry, bow. But the spaces between the motions began to stretch. The halls felt longer. The steps took a breath longer to echo. And sometimes, just sometimes, she'd reach a corner and forget which way she'd come. No Face was never far behind. He didn't speak. He didn't interfere. But wherever she paused, he appeared. In a shadow just a little deeper than the rest. In a hallway mirror with no reflection. In the still surface of a bath just as it calmed. The other spirits began to notice, but quietly. A silence would pass through a room when Sen entered. Conversations paused just before she passed by. Small offerings appeared in her cubby each morning. A knot of twine, a button carved from bone, a dried flower shaped like a bell. None of them were signed, but all of them were placed with intention. One evening, while she carried a tray of fresh leaves for a ceremonial soak, Sen found Haku in the hallway outside the herbal storage room. He stood as if waiting, not for her, but for something else. His expression was distant, weathered. "Something's wrong," he said without greeting. Sen slowed but didn't stop. "Is it no face?" "No," he said, "not only." He turned to look at her, and for the first time there was uncertainty in his eyes. Not fear, just lack. "Have you changed something?" Sen shook her head. "I don't think so." "Something is remembering," he said softly. "That's how the trouble starts." She wanted to ask more, but the tray was growing heavy in her hands. She bowed slightly, moved on. Later, as she prepared a small guest room for an arriving spirit, she noticed the walls breathing deeper than usual. The sliding door pulsed slightly in its frame. The floorboards gave under her step, not with age, but with permission, as if yielding to her presence. A paper charm drifted down from the rafters without wind. She caught it. It was blank, but warm. That night she slept uneasily, not because she was frightened, but because the air around her had become so full of watching, full of waiting, full of meaning asterisk, and the kind of silence that precedes the telling of a long-held secret. In her dreams, a river called her name. But it didn't use Sen. It used something older. Something soft and flowing and full of moss and light. She couldn't remember the sound when she woke, but the shape of it stayed in her chest, like a lantern covered in silk. Morning came without sound. No bell, no chime. Just a gentle thinning of shadow, as if the bathhouse had chosen to wake slowly today. Sen opened her eyes to find the lanterns still glowing faintly. Around her the others stirred, but none spoke. Even Lin moved without comment, her footsteps quiet as she passed. Sen rose, folded her blanket, and stepped into the corridor. The floor felt warmer than usual. The wood hummed beneath her bare feet, not with sound, but with memory, like it had been waiting for her weight, like her presence completed some unseen circuit. As she moved, the bathhouse moved with her, softly adjusting, like a room turning towards sunlight. She was sent to the storage room that day. A small space tucked behind the main kitchens, full of cedar shelves and clay jars and rolled paper charms tied with faded string. The air was dry and smelled of incense and something older, bitter, like dried flowers left too long in the sun. Sen was told to restock the herbal sachets, a quiet task, the kind given when words aren't ready. As she worked, her fingers brushed against a folded cloth tucked between the jars. It was soft, faded blue linen with a pattern that shimmered faintly in the light, not spirit-made, not new. She held it gently. Her chest tightened. She didn't know why. A breeze passed through the room, even though there were no windows. It stirred the edges of the scrolls. The herbs in the open jars rustled like paper. And in that breath of wind, she heard something. Not a voice, not a word, but the echo of rushing water. The sound of a river, not near, not now, but before asterisk. The cloth in her hands warmed. She closed her eyes. A memory brushed her, not hers, but familiar, a boy in water, pale and still, hands reaching, a body sinking, then hands beneath him, a current lifting, a name whispered and lost. She opened her eyes. The cloth was just a cloth again. The jars sat quietly on the shelf. But her heartbeat had changed, slower, heavier. When she left the room, the hallway outside had shifted. Not in shape, but in feeling. The air was thicker, shadows stretched longer, the paper walls seemed to hum beneath their painted patterns. As she passed a mirror, she didn't see herself. Instead, she saw a wide river, glowing in dusk light, a bridge spanning its quiet length, and a house with a red roof tucked among reeds. Then the image blinked, and it was just her reflection again. Haku found her near the kitchen steps. He looked different. Not ill, not weakened, just afraid. Like something had been tugging at his edges. "You felt it," he said without asking. Sen nodded. "The river?" she asked. Haku looked past her, toward a window where the rain had just begun. "It's trying to come back," he said, "but it can't find itself, not yet." Sen held out the folded cloth. This was in the storeroom. Haku didn't take it, he just stared at it. Then, after a long moment, he said, "That was mine." His voice was very quiet. Sen's fingers closed around the cloth again. "I saw a memory," she said. He nodded. "They're starting to return," he said. "Not just mine, the bathhouses, yours too." They stood together for a while in the quiet corridor, the only sound the drip of rain from the eaves and the low murmur of a teapot from the kitchen. Then Haku said, "Be careful." Sen looked up. "Of what?" "Of remembering," he replied. "It can be heavier than forgetting." But she didn't feel heavy. She felt grounded, like roots stirring beneath earth after too long a sleep. And somewhere beyond the paper walls, no face watched without moving, holding a single gold flake in his open palm as if it were the last light before dawn. The wind changed at mid-morning. It swept in low across the river, curling under the bridge and through the corridors of the bathhouse with a voice like cloth tearing slowly underwater. It didn't howl, it didn't snap. It just arrived, quiet but full, like the weight of something long overdue. Lanterns flickered on their hooks. Curtains billowed even when no doors were open. Dust rose from corners that hadn't moved in years. Kamaji felt it first. He paused in the middle of his routine, one arm extended toward the fire grate, and tilted his head as if listening to something very far away. "Storm's coming," he said to no one in particular, "not just weather." The soot sprites slowed their dance. In the main halls, the spirits whispered more than usual. Some packed early, some lingered near the exits. Yubaba locked her ledgers without finishing them. Even Lin moved with less noise, her usual snark dulled by something she couldn't name. Sen was sent to the linen room. But halfway down the hall, a gust of wind pushed open the far doors, and the rain arrived, not in drops, but in mist. A slow drift, like the breath of the sky brushing its lips against the roof. She watched from the threshold as the courtyard filled with it. And somewhere, just past the gate, something waited. Not no face. Not a guest. Something older. She stepped outside. The floorboards beneath her feet were slick with moisture, the wood darkened to deep brown. Steam curled up from the open pools, and the lanterns along the walkway had all dimmed, their lights struggling against the thickening air. Across the bridge stood a shape. No umbrella, no robes. Just a form tall, still, silent, wrapped in wind and rain, indistinct as if drawn in charcoal and half erased. Sen did not move closer, but she did not turn away. The figure didn't enter. It only waited. And after a long, breathless pause, it bowed. Not deeply, not demanding. Just enough to be seen. Sen bowed in return. Behind her, the bathhouse creaked. She turned and walked back inside. That evening, the halls were quieter than ever. No face stayed close, but further back than before. His eyes beneath the mask, dark, round, and unreadable, seemed to flicker more than usual. He held nothing in his hands, not gold, not cloth, only stillness. Sen worked the evening shift with Lin, who said little. The rooms seemed darker, even with the lamps lit. The steam moved slower, the walls felt closer. And yet Sen did not feel afraid. She felt ready. Or rather, like the part of her that had always been here, was now more awake than the rest. At the end of her shift, she found the old linen she'd washed earlier had dried in a strange pattern, marks like river reeds, and flowing water spread across the fabric without dye or paint. She folded it gently. Outside, the storm grew no louder, but it deepened. The river swelled. The lamps bowed their flames toward the floor. And far off, the wind whispered something that made the bathhouse exhale, deep and slow, like a long-held breath finally released. The storm did not roar. It settled, like dust in the air, like a hush falling over a crowd too wise to speak. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but the clouds remained, heavy, silver, pressing low. The bridge outside was slick with water, each board shining faintly like a scale in low light. Sen stood at the main gate. She hadn't meant to. She'd woken early, the bathhouse still asleep, her feet guiding her through silent halls as if she were following a scent or a sound too soft for ears. The gate was slightly ajar, as though the bathhouse itself had remembered to leave room for something. The spirit stood there, just across the threshold. Now visible, now waiting. Its form was tall but not towering. It shimmered faintly, as if made of wet stone and fading sky. Its face was simple, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth like polished driftwood or the surface of an old river rock. Moss clung to the hem of its robe. A single branch, bare and fine, jutted gently from one shoulder. It bowed, not to demand entry, but to ask. Sen stepped aside. The spirit moved forward. Its presence didn't press. It didn't stir the wind. It simply was asterisk, a part of the bathhouse now, as if it had always been walking these floors and only now remembered the way home. Behind her, the halls awakened. Curtains swayed, lanterns blinked open. Steam began to curl through the upper vents. The pipes moaned gently, not in protest, but in welcome. Kamaji felt it first. He poured a ladle of hot water over the stones, then paused. He turned his head, eyes narrowing in thought. "It's not a guest," he murmured. "It's a return." Yubaba felt it next. From her tall chamber, she looked out across the tiled rooftops, one eyebrow raised. "Old energy," she muttered, "old rules." But she didn't interfere. She only adjusted the knot on her robe and poured herself a darker tea. Sen followed the spirit through the hallways. It made no sound, but as it passed, the walls brightened by a single shade. The wood underfoot grew warmer, and every so often, small spirits turned toward it, not with fear, but reverence, like seeing a story walk past that had once only been told in whispers. At the main bath, the water rippled before it stepped in. It didn't disrobe. It didn't hesitate. It simply lowered itself into the water like a stone, returning to its river. And the bath accepted it. The steam rose higher. The scent of cedar and early spring filled the air. Sen sat beside the pool, a towel folded in her lap, her eyes soft and still. She didn't speak. She didn't offer help. She only stayed. And in that stillness, something passed between them. Not words, not names, but recognition. The spirit stayed in the water for a long time. When it finally emerged, droplets clung to it in perfect orbs. No footprints marked the floor as it moved. It paused in front of Sen and extended one hand. In its palm rested a small, pale seed. She accepted it without question. It was warm, smooth, humming faintly. The spirit bowed again, deeper this time, then turned and with the slow grace of falling mist, walked back through the bathhouse, down the stairs, across the bridge, and disappeared into the clouds that still hung over the horizon. No face appeared in the hallway behind her. He did not speak, but he knelt beside her as she looked down at the seed cupped in her palms. The bathhouse sighed. Not tired, not burdened, just older now. And Sen still, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Sen held the seed in her hands for a long time. She didn't know why. It was light, round, smooth as river stone, no markings, no glow, and yet it pulsed faintly in her palms, not with warmth or magic, but with something older, something patient asterisk. It felt remembered. That morning, no one gave her orders. Lin passed her in the hall and nodded once, but said nothing. Kamaji didn't shout down for towels. Even Yubaba, hidden behind her high walls and velvet curtains, made no demands. It was as though the bathhouse itself had paused, waiting to see what she would do. So she walked. Not hurriedly, not lost. Just slowly, letting her feet carry her past the great bath, past the guest rooms, past the windows where rain still painted soft lines. No face followed from a distance, neither hiding nor intruding. Finally, she reached a courtyard she hadn't visited before. It was small, tucked behind the laundry room and the back stairs, where the stones were cracked and moss crept in from the edges. A single tree stood at the center, bare, slender, its branches reaching upward like quiet questions. Sen knelt at its roots. The earth smelled of wet leaves and old things, not decay, but memory, the kind of scent that clings to books left closed for too long. She dug with her hands. Not far, just enough. Then she placed the seed into the hollow, gently as a breath, and pressed the earth back over it with flat palms. There was no sound, no spark, no shift in the sky. But the tree moved. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just a single creak, low and slow, like a deep exhale from something that had forgotten it still had lungs. The moss at its base grew brighter, and the branches above shimmered, not with light but with clarity, as if the tree had just remembered its own shape. Sen sat back, hands still in the dirt. She didn't expect flowers. She didn't expect change. Only continuation. No face stepped forward and knelt beside her. He placed a small golden flake on the soil, not as payment, but as offering. Then he sat beside her, quiet as always, the wind pulling faintly at the edge of his robe. Above them, the sky lightened. Not cleared, not blue. Just asterisk, lighter asterisk. Inside the bathhouse, a hallway door long stuck creaked open. A spirit who had not spoken in years whispered a name no one else heard. A tile on the rooftop, long missing, returned with a soft thump as if it had never left. Small things, but alive. Sen stayed with the tree until the bells rang for evening. When she rose, she pressed one hand against its bark. It was warm. She didn't smile, but she didn't need to. The moment had already settled in the roots. And the bathhouse, timber, tiles, spirit, and stone carried it forward. Sen was folding linens when the wind changed again. Not outside. Inside. It curled down the hallway near the soot chamber, lifting curtains, fluttering through open doorways like a whisper remembering its path. Even the lamps blinked once, as if startled, and then steadied. She paused, cloth in hand, and looked up. No one called for her. No alarm was raised. But every spirit, every corner, every quiet floorboard seemed to hold its breath. Then softly, the bathhouse opened its door. Not a door anyone had seen before. It was beside the boiler room, behind a low arch draped in moss and forgotten ropes. The door had been a wall yesterday. Today it was open. And through it stepped Haku, or what was left of him. He didn't fall. He didn't speak. But his steps were unsteady, his robe torn, streaked with something darker than water. His hair was loose, and his arms trembled as if remembering strength, but not quite reaching it. Sen dropped the linen. She met him halfway, arms catching his weight as he leaned forward, not collapsing, not yielding, but simply allowing himself to rest. "You're back," she said softly, though the words weren't a question. Haku said nothing. His breath was shallow but calm. She helped him to the soot room, Kamaji already clearing space without being asked. The boiler hissed low, gentle as a lullaby. Soot sprites gathered in the corners, their eyes wide but kind. Sen cleaned the wound with warm water and cloths. It wasn't deep, but it lingered, asterisk. It clung to Haku like a memory unwilling to fade, something tangled beneath skin and silence. It didn't bleed, it just was asterisk, old, heavy. She dipped her cloth again. "Where did you go?" she asked. Haku's eyes flickered open, pale green clouded like river water after a storm. "To find my name," he whispered. The words hurt to say. Sen paused, waited. "It's hidden," he said. "Not taken, not stolen, just asleep." He turned his head slightly, the light catching the edges of his face, sharper now, as though the pain had sculpted him into something older. "Did you find it?" she asked. "Not yet," he said, "but I heard it like a bell underwater." Sen placed her hand over his. The wound pulsed gently beneath her touch, not in pain, but in memory. It was less a cut, more a mark left behind by something he'd once given away freely. "I'll help you," she said. Haku looked at her, then truly looked, and something behind his eyes eased, just a little. He nodded. The bathhouse exhaled again, quietly, the kind of breath it gave only when something long-waited had finally returned. Kamaji handed Sen a jar of old balm. "Use this," he muttered. "It doesn't fix the body, just reminds it how to heal." She opened it. The scent of mountain wind and riverbank moss filled the room, familiar, though she'd never smelled it before. She dabbed it over Haku's side. His eyes closed again. Not from pain, but from peace. Outside, the rain had returned, softer now, like a lullaby. And the bathhouse, once again, held what it had almost forgotten. Sen dreamed of leaves. They drifted past her in slow spirals, suspended in air that felt more like water, thick, warm, weightless. The leaves were golden, but not like coins, like autumn, like light just before it slips below the trees. She was standing on a stone path. She knew the path, though she'd never walked it. Moss grew in the cracks, roots curled beneath her feet. Above, a canopy of branches swayed soundlessly. Wind passed through without sound. The air held a silence so perfect it felt alive. A voice called to her. Not loud, not urgent, just certain. It spoke a name. Not Sen, not a spirit name. Her name. The one she had carried before the tunnel. The one she hadn't spoken in what felt like 1,000 soft hours. The name her parents gave her, wrapped in lullabies and morning cereal, and the sound of gravel beneath a school bag. Chihiro. She turned in the dream. There was no one there. Only the leaves. Only the air. Only the feeling of something being returned. The name echoed once more, not aloud, but through her chest, her breath, her balance. She remembered the weight of it, the shape of its syllables, the way it had always been hers, even as she walked through a world that had asked her to leave it behind. She woke slowly. The dream clung to her skin like mist. Her name was still there. Not shouted, not warned, just a present. She sat up. The room was quiet. No face sat curled near the door, unmoving, as if guarding her sleep. A new paper charm had been placed at the foot of her blanket, tied with twine. She picked it up. One character had been written on it in soft, dark ink. Kai, the first sound. She traced it with her finger, and her breath caught, not in fear, but in recognition. The bathhouse didn't speak it aloud. It didn't need to. It had begun to remember her, too. Later, as she walked to the kitchens, Lin passed her and paused. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, but not unkindly. Sen smiled gently. "Nothing." Lin tilted her head, narrowed her eyes, then shrugged. "You look different, taller or something." Sen didn't reply. But the seed in her pocket, left from the spirit at the bath, had grown warm again. She touched it without thinking, and beneath her feet, the bathhouse floor gave the softest creak. A sound of welcome. A sound of knowing. That night, as she passed a mirror on the second-floor landing, her reflection looked straight at her. No delay, no flicker. And she saw her name in her eyes. Not a spell, not a title, just asterisk herself, asterisk, returned. The preparations began without announcement. There were no orders from you, Barber. No posted signs or summoned meetings. But still, the bathhouse shifted. Curtains were washed, even the ones hanging in rooms long unused. Lanterns were polished until they gleamed like resting moons. Carpets were lifted and beaten gently in the courtyard, their dust rising like old stories. The walls were wiped with cloths dipped in cedar water, and the ceilings were swept with soft, wide brooms that whispered as they passed. The spirits worked in silence. Not solemn, just focused, as if they knew something important was drawing near, though none could quite say what. Sen was sent to the upper halls that day, rooms she'd never entered, rooms with windows that looked out onto mist and sky, where birds carved silent paths through the clouds and the wind pressed like breath against the wooden walls. One room was filled with folded paper cranes, thousands of them, their wings faded but still crisp. Another held shelves of hourglasses, each filled with a different kind of sand, black, white, violet, shimmering gold. None of them moved. All had stopped mid-fall, as if time had exhaled and not returned. She didn't ask questions. She just cleaned. Wiped, swept, polished, folded. Her fingers knew the rhythm by now, and her thoughts moved like water through reeds, gentle, unresisting. Downstairs, Lin muttered more than usual, her arms full of towels, her brow furrowed even as she kept moving. "The bathhouse is nervous," she said once, not to anyone in particular. "Can't you feel it?" Sen could. The doors creaked more, even when closed. The floors felt warmer under bare feet. The scent of the air shifted from soap and steam to something richer, earthy, like riverbeds at low tide, like train smoke, like farewells. That night, Haku appeared in the main hall. His wounds were gone, but his presence was thinner, stretched, like parchment left too long in the sun. He found Sen arranging jars in the kitchen. "Something's coming," he said. "I know," she replied. "It might be the end." Sen turned, calm. "Of what?" Haku looked past her, toward the corridor that led to the gate. "Of forgetting," he said. Sen nodded. She didn't know what she would be asked to do, or what she would need to give. But she felt ready, not certain, just steady, like a stone placed at the edge of a current, not to stop the water, but to mark where it changes. In her room, the seed from the spirit had sprouted. Just barely. A single green thread rising from the cloth she kept it wrapped in. No soil, no light, just memory and time. She sat beside it for a long while, the bathhouse humming quietly around her. Then, from far off, a sound began. Soft at first. A chime. A bell. Not the one used for guests, not the bath bell or the kitchen timer. This bell was older. Low, deep, carried in the bones. The spirits heard it. One by one, they paused, then continued their work, but slower now, with reverence. Zen stood. The bell was not calling her. It was waiting for her. And soon, she would walk the path it had opened. The bathhouse was still when Sen awoke. Not empty, not quiet, still, like a lake just before the ripple. No face stood in the doorway. He did not speak, he never had, but he nodded once and that was enough. Sen rose and dressed. The sprouted seed remained behind, wrapped gently in cloth, glowing faintly as though aware of her absence, but not troubled by it. She placed it by the windowsill, where the morning light barely touched the edge of the wooden frame. Outside, the air was soft and pale. Mist hung like fabric across the sky, and the wooden boards of the walkway sighed beneath her steps. The bell sounded again. Once, then silence. Not silence as in emptiness, but as in asterisk invitation. Kamaji met her at the bottom of the stairs. He didn't look surprised. Off are you? Sen nodded, I think so. He handed her a satchel, worn, soft, the strap wrapped in soot-sprite thread. Nothing in there but warm rice, dried plum, and a little salt, he said. Sometimes that's enough. She bowed deeply, thank you. Just remember where your feet started, he replied, and where they'd like to return. Outside the bathhouse walls, the river stretched wide and grey beneath the morning sky. The bridge had lengthened, reaching farther than it ever had, and beyond it, the rails gleamed faintly. The spirit train was coming. She could feel it before she could see it. A low hum, steady and deep, like breath in stone, like memory returning. Haku stood at the end of the bridge. He was no longer worn, no longer frayed, but distant, like a picture drawn in fog, still him, still real, but with something else behind his eyes now, something deeper. You don't have to go, he said softly. I know, Sen replied. But you will. Yes. He nodded, then reached into his robe and pulled out a small charm, plain, made of wood, wrapped in red string. For remembering, he said. Sen took it, tucked it into her pocket beside the warmth of the sprouted seed. The train arrived without sound. Its windows glowed amber in the mist. Doors slid open with a whisper and no conductor appeared, just the space itself waiting. Sen stepped aboard. No face followed, silent as breath. The doors closed behind them. As the train pulled away, the bathhouse did not grow smaller. It simply faded into the fog, its shape lingering like a story paused, not ended. Sen sat by the window. Outside, the water stretched on both sides of the tracks. Empty houses drifted in the distance. Paper lanterns bobbed like thoughts. The train did not shake, it did not whistle, it glided. And within her chest, something began to stir. Not fear, not longing, but a question, soft and deep, like a name spoken underwater, like the feeling of returning to somewhere you've never been. She closed her eyes. The world outside kept moving, and within her the answer began to form, not as words, but as asterisk recognition asterisk. The train slid to a stop without slowing. One moment it was moving. The next it was not. No jolt, no change in light, only the faint hiss of mist parting as the doors opened. Zen stood. The world outside was soft and silver, shaped from stillness. A platform stretched out before her, built of stone smoothed by time and salt. Lamps lined its edges, unlit. Their glass held dust, but not decay. No face stepped off first. He looked around, turned once, then waited. Sen followed. The moment her foot touched the platform, the train behind her faded, not disappeared, not vanished, just receded, as if it had never been there at all, only drawn from her need and now quietly unspooling back into fog. The sky above was low, almost within reach. A single crow flew overhead, wings silent, its shadow barely a thought on the stone. Sen looked ahead. Beyond the platform, a narrow path led down into a field. But not a normal field. It was made of reeds, tall, pale, and swaying in wind that couldn't be felt. Their tips glowed faintly, not with fire, with memory. She walked. The reed path didn't guide her. It listened to her steps and adjusted accordingly, parting gently. The air smelled of warm water and old paper. Every so often, a whisper passed, a voice not quite formed, not meant for ears, only for the edges of thoughts. She came to a gate. Wooden, simple, half open. She stepped through. On the other side was a house. Small, red-roofed, set near a wide, slow-moving river. Her breath caught. The river. It was the one from her dreams. The one that called to her. The water curved gently, smooth as silk, dotted with pale stones and curled leaves. The current sang without sound, and she knew, without being told, that this place remembered her. Not as a visitor, as a piece. She stepped closer to the water's edge. There beside a flat stone lay a pair of shoes. Small, worn, children's shoes. Her shoes. The ones she'd worn before the tunnel, before the bathhouse, before she forgot what her own name felt like in her chest. She knelt and picked them up. They were warm, not with magic, with memory. A voice rose from the water, not a sound but a shape. It didn't speak in words. It spoke in the rhythm of heartbeats, the pulse of dreams, the hush of someone calling your name when you're nearly asleep. Chihiro. It wasn't a summons. It wasn't a command. It was a homecoming. She whispered the name back to the river, and the reeds bowed. Behind her, No Face stood still, but now he was no longer just shadow. His mask glowed faintly, and his outline softened, as if he too was being remembered by the world. Chihiro sat by the riverbank. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She only listened. And in that silence, the bathhouse far behind her exhaled once more, content to wait. Because now Chihiro remembered. And remembering was enough. For now, Chihiro walked along the riverbank. She carried her old shoes in her hands, not as burdens, but as offerings. Their soles were still dusty, the laces frayed, but they held something now they hadn't before, a sense of return, of belonging. The sky above was pale, the kind of blue that only appears after long mist. The reeds swayed beside her, tall and whispering. Each step felt familiar, like a story she had once lived but forgotten how to tell. She followed the curve of the water. And then she saw him. Haku. He stood at the bend in the river, half shadowed by overhanging branches. His robe fluttered lightly in the breeze. His feet were bare, toes just touching the water's edge, as though unsure whether to leave or remain. He didn't turn, but he knew she was there. You remembered, he said softly. Chihiro nodded. I didn't know it was you, she whispered, but I felt it. He looked back at her then. His eyes were tired, but not dim, more like lanterns that had burned through many nights and learned to flicker gently instead of flare. I almost forgot too, he said, but I couldn't, not fully. You were the one thing I held on to. They stood quietly together. The river murmured beneath their silence, curling gently past their feet, glinting with the sun's first gold. I dropped a shoe in this river once, Chihiro said after a long pause. I slipped, I would have drowned. Haku nodded. I carried you to the shore. She looked down. The water reflected their shapes now, not distorted, but softened. Their edges blurred just enough to remind her that they were not quite of the same world, and yet connected all the same. You're the river spirit, she said. I was. But you're also Haku. I don't know where one ends and the other begins anymore. She stepped closer. The wind caught the hem of her shirt, and the reeds leaned inward, as if listening. You saved me before I ever knew your name, she said. You gave it back to me when I'd forgotten my own, he replied. Their reflections touched. No ceremony followed. No transformation, no fanfare. Only stillness. Only truth. And the water held it all, like pages between hands, like a breath before sleep, like something old and beautiful that asked for nothing but to be remembered. They sat at the riverbank together, watching the current move. And in that shared silence, the bond between them did not grow stronger. It simply was asterisk, as if it had always been there, as if it had never needed words to exist. The bathhouse began to change again. Not visibly, not with sound or light, but in rhythm. The floorboards no longer creaked in protest, they hummed in cadence with the wind. The pipes no longer hissed with pressure, they exhaled like sleeping animals. Even the lamps, though unchanged, seemed to lean ever so slightly toward the door. Something was coming, or something was letting go. Kamaji knew it before anyone. He stood at his boiler, hands paused over the valves, listening, not to steam, but to memory. The fire beneath the water burned lower now, not dim, but deeper, like coals waiting for the next story to arrive. Lin noticed it in the air. It carried the scent of old wood, of last goodbyes not mourned but understood. She didn't ask questions, just folded towels more carefully, stirred the bath oils more slowly. Her sarcasm softened around the edges like snow melting at the corners of a roof. No face sat near the window, still and small. He had not followed Chihiro to the riverbank. But he waited, not for her return, for her choice, because everyone in the bathhouse could feel it now. Chihiro's time here was not ending. It was asterisk opening asterisk, and she would have to decide which way to step through. In the courtyard, the small tree that had grown from the spirit's seed had changed. It bore no flowers, no fruit, only leaves. Leaves shaped like memory. One fluttered down and landed beside the laundry line, its veins forming a soft pattern, a spiral, a path. At the edge of the hallway near the front gate, Yubaba stood with arms crossed, not angry, not resigned. Her eyes were sharp as ever, but not unkind. "She'll come back here," she muttered, mostly to herself. Zeniba had sent no messages. There were no scrolls, no visitors. Only wind, only timing, only the soft understanding that the spirit world did not hold anyone against their will. It only gave them what they needed long enough to remember how to ask for more. At the riverbank, Chihiro rose. Haku stood beside her. The sun had risen higher now, casting pale gold over the water's surface. Their shadows no longer stretched. They sat beside them, equal and quiet. "Will the door close?" she asked. "Not all the way," Haku said, "but it won't stay open forever." She nodded. "I don't know what I'm returning to." "You're not returning to the past," he said. "You're returning to yourself." That settled into her chest like warm tea. No answers, just readiness. She looked out over the reeds, the water, the path that curved behind the hill and led to where the train might someday pass again. "I think I need to go." Haku said nothing, but his presence didn't falter. It expanded, as if the river itself leaned in to say, "That is enough." The path from the river was still. No birds called from the trees, no reeds rustled without reason. The air was clear, but not loud, like a page turned in a library long after closing. Chihiro walked slowly. She wore the same clothes she'd arrived in, though they no longer fit quite the same. Not smaller, not larger, just different, as if the girl who'd once worn them had shifted slightly inside her own shape. The satchel Kamaji had given her swung gently against her hip. Inside, rice, plum, salt. And tucked in the pocket, next to the charm from Haku, was the sprouted seed, wrapped now in a soft strip of linen. It pulsed faintly, not like magic, but like something alive and content to wait. The sky overhead was pale gold. As she walked, the path remembered her. Places that had once seemed unfamiliar now tilted slightly with recognition. The mossy stone where she'd paused with Lynn, the split-rail fence she'd clutched in fear, the low tree where soot sprites once gathered to watch her pass. Each piece of the world acknowledged her without fanfare. As if saying, "Yes, we knew you'd return." She passed the bathhouse once more. It stood silent, dignified, its windows reflecting the shifting sky. The lanterns were unlit, the doors half closed, but it breathed, not sleeping, not waking, just being. No face stood at the edge of the bridge. He didn't speak. He didn't wave. He simply nodded. And Chihiro nodded back. It was enough. The bridge felt longer now. Each plank seemed to stretch and flex under her weight, not out of strain but memory. It had carried her once before, fearful, uncertain, changed. Now it carried her again, still changed but steady, soft-footed and whole. At the far end of the bridge, the tunnel waited. The same stone arch, the same tangled ivy, the same cool hush. Her parents weren't there. Not yet. But she felt them ahead, like voices around the bend of a hallway, familiar, close. She paused at the mouth of the tunnel. Turned once. The bathhouse stood behind her, framed by mist and distance, neither smaller nor larger, simply asterisk there, as real as breath. Chihiro placed one hand on the tunnel wall. It was smooth beneath her fingers. "I won't forget," she said softly. And the tunnel, without reply, seemed to hold her words in trust. She stepped inside. Light filtered in through the far end. Dust drifted in golden spirals. Her shoes whispered on the stone floor. And with each step, she wasn't leaving the spirit world. She was carrying it. Not in her hands, not in her satchel, but in the quiet, patient space behind her ribs. The place where names settle, where memories root, where the wind that once passed over lanterns still hums, even when the lamps are dark. The tunnel was short, shorter than she remembered. It curved once to the left, then to the right, and the light at the far end grew brighter, not blinding, just steady, like morning through a bedroom window. Her footsteps echoed once more, softly. Then the stone turned to dirt, and the air shifted. Warmer, lighter, real. She emerged into the clearing. The sky was a gentle blue. Cicadas buzzed faintly in the trees. The tall grass whispered in the breeze like it had been doing so all along, never missing a beat. Her parents stood a few steps ahead. They were brushing off their clothes, confused but calm. Her mother looked back over her shoulder. "There you are," she said, not worried. "You were dragging your feet again." Chihiro blinked. The bathhouse, the river, the spirit train, all of it was gone, or rather hidden, folded back behind the veil of the ordinary. The tunnel's shadow stretched long behind her, cool and quiet. She looked down. Her shoes were dusty. The satchel still hung at her side, but her pockets empty. No charm, no sprouted seed, only memory. And yet she didn't feel the loss, because now it lived in her. "Come on," her father called gently, "we should get going." She stepped forward, her feet lighter than before, her balance sure. As they walked back toward the parked car, she glanced once more over her shoulder. Just trees, just the sky, just wind. But she smiled, because she knew what lay just beyond that quiet green, a world still humming beneath the ordinary one, not gone, not closed, just folded gently like a note placed between pages of a favorite book. They got into the car. The seats were warm from the sun. Her father started the engine. It purred softly. Her mother turned to face her. "Ready?" she asked. Chihiro nodded. And as the car pulled away down the winding road, the trees blurred gently past the windows once more, just like before, but she no longer leaned against the glass. She sat upright, awake, present, listening not just to the hum of the engine, but to the deeper rhythm beneath it. The one that never leaves you once you've heard it. The one that sounds like your true name spoken kindly. And somewhere far behind the trees, the spirit world exhaled, grateful to have been remembered.